A great afternoon. I have some beautiful faces. Before we get started, we've got a list of upcoming programs. So in May, Ed is going to present Sicily's ancient landscapes and timeless traditions. So that'll be exciting. So then we're going to skip over June, July, and August, and then start off with a bang, Travel 101 in September. So that's going to cover things that wherever we are in travel, for TSA pre-check, ADA, packing tips, you name it, we're going to cover it. So if you have things that we'll include our email address that you can send us topics to cover for September if you'd like to do that. October, we've got our interactive member appreciation experience. You guys are not going to want to miss this. This is something we had to cancel in January. So this is an opportunity for you as a club member to tell us where you want to go and what you want to learn about and what topics are hot for you. So we're going to work on that. November, we've got Eric Schweitzer. He's going to talk about Patagonia and Antarctica. That's going to be really cool. And then in December, we've got, let's see, Lighthouses, Sentinels of the Sea with Tom Anderson. So now let's welcome our speaker, Rob McWilliams, and his wife, Beth is not with us today, but she was very important in getting everything organized, and of course she was on the trip. They recently retired to Sun City from their home in Wheeling, West Virginia. Rob was a federal prosecutor and Beth was a nurse. They have traveled to Honduras, Mexico, Canada, the Caribbean, and visited much of the U.S. And so today, Rob's presentation is a travel log covering their explorations of the Pacific Northwest on a riverboat cruise of the Snake and Columbia Rivers. And it has a Lewis and Clark theme, so really cool exploration type thing. Why take a river cruise in the United States, you ask? Because when you dock, you can put your feet on the ground and actually explore the territory that you may have only driven through, but never really had a chance to experience. Plus, your motel room, clothes, restaurant, entertainment, and friends are already on the boat when you return from your day of exploring. The riverboat that they were on had no casinos, pools, Vegas-style entertainment, or 24-hour eating. But there were a couple of hundred fellow cruisers on this small vessel experiencing our country's history, which is truly extraordinary. During their Lewis and Clark expedition cruise on board, there were historians that explained the history and geography of the land, and then it was time for free drinks, socializing with friends, dinner, and light entertainment. A great way to see our own backyard rather than queuing up for an international flight. Without further ado, Mr. Rob McWilliams.
Thank you very much. Questions at the end. I make sure I give you the microphone so that people on Zoom hear you. I got to thank Ben Rainey for volunteering this presentation. I go to Bible study once a week. I was going on this cruise, and he said, take a lot of pictures so you can give a presentation. Here I am. And then I have to thank him because it took some effort for me at least to get my pictures from my Apple laptop to the Mac or the Microsoft computer, Travel Club computer. So I give her a lot of thanks. No, that's not a picture I took. Ed said, did you take that? That's really good. I did not. You'll have to ask EB about that. This is my hour. My wife, we got a call just a few days ago from my youngest son who lives just south of Charlotte. And he has a 9, a 7, and a 5-year-old. And he said, hey, you want the kids birthday? Are you going to say no? So my wife is home with those three. And then we learned a few days ago also that our 24-year-old grandson is coming up from Florida with his new girlfriend. So we have a house full of people, and that's where my wife is right now. My first river cruise, and a lot of it, the benefits were just read to you by EB. It is really just a sightseeing cruise. If you're interested in Las Vegas shows, if you're interested in eating 24/7 buffets, gambling, swimming, big workout centers, going to the jewelry store on board, this is not for you. We had about, I would say, 200 guests. And they were all like us, old and retired. There were no little kids, there's no teenagers, and the young people, of course, are home working, earning money. And so that's the kind of cruise this is. And let me just tell you, these aren't cheap. And I don't know why, maybe because there's only 200 or 300 guests. We booked this several months in advance, and it was almost all booked up. And all these other cruises, there's probably 30 plus cruises at American Cruise Lines, and I'm not pushing them at all, but there's probably 30 different cruises or more that they cruise down to the United States, and they cruise both ways. We went east-west on the Columbia River. Well, they also cruise back again. So when you say 30, it's not probably a total of 30 rivers, but there's certainly enough out there for you to spend a lot of your time cruising rivers. When I say it's not cheap, we initially booked like the basic cabin, which is a hotel room. That's exactly what it looks like. It was 10 grand for 7 days. They say it's 8 days, seven nights and 8 days, but the 8th day you're off the boat by 8 o'clock. So they take you to the airport, but it was 10 grand. And that may or may not include airfare. It just depends on what promotions they have. Our particular cruise did not include airfare. So this is about a $1,200 vacation, but it was well worth it. I don't think I would ever take an ocean cruise again, because I'm not into gambling and eating all day and night. So with that, let's just start. We started the course in Bluffton, drove down to Savannah. We flew to Colorado, and our ultimate destination was Lewiston Airport in Idaho. And what was ironic is I think we left on a Tuesday. And on Monday was the first flight ever, at least recently, I think it was United, from Denver to Lewiston. And in Lewiston, their airport, we arrived at night, their airport makes Hilton Head look like Atlanta. The only people there were the 25 or so people that got off the plane. When we got off, we called the hotel, they brought us a cab, and we ended up in Clarkston, Washington. And the benefit to that, and staying there, is that you're within 200 or 300 yards of the boat. You can walk down to the boat. Of course, the cruise line takes your luggage down for you. But that was the benefit of going to Lewiston and then Clarkston. Some of the cruisers, the guests, flew to Spokane, Washington. I looked it up. It's not Spokane, it's Spokane, Washington. And the drawback to them is on the morning of the cruise, they probably had over a 2-hour bus ride from Spokane down to Lewiston. All right, let's go to the next slide here. I took this from the website. This happened to be American Cruise Line. And as I showed you there, we landed in Lewiston, went over to Clarkston, and we had a pre-cruise package, which was a jet boat cruise on the Snake River. The Snake River, you can see it on here. It's a dotted line that goes down from Clarkston down towards what they call Hell's Canyon. Hell's Canyon is the deepest canyon in the United States, maybe North America, deeper than the Grand Canyon. And it's basically inaccessible except by helicopter or jet boat. And I'm just going to talk a little bit before I show any scenery, because most of these slides are just scenery, and we'll look at it for 3 seconds and we'll move on to the next one. I'll have a few I'll make some comments at. But this pre-cruise package was a day on Hell's Canyon or Snake River. That probably cost us about $600, which included another extra night in the hotel room, plus of course your breakfast, but it was worth every penny of it. And these pre-cruise and even the excursions that you take when you come into port, they change all the time. I got on the website, and this particular cruise line now has a helicopter tour of Hell's Canyon, which I had a helicopter tour when I went on my honeymoon in Hawaii, and worth every penny. We get on the helicopter, dive down between these mountains. Pendleton is known for what they call their underground city. Way back when, they had an underground city where there was gambling and other bad things going on. It's also home of one of the largest, if not the largest, rodeos in the country. And then we'll go to the Dalles, and I'll stop there and we'll start with some pictures. Dalles is pronounced phonetically D-A-L-Z, one syllable. And you don't live in Dalles, or you don't visit Dalles, you live in the Dalles, and you visit the Dalles. And the Dalles was the last stop of the Oregon Trail because the trail just got too rough for wagons on your way to the Pacific. And the Dalles is known for two other things. There's 150 Google employees in the Dalles. And believe me, when you see these pictures, you gotta like hiking and camping, because there's not a whole lot of in this area of the country. And the Dalles, I didn't know this until in preparation for this little talk, I did some more research. And I remember this. I would have been a young lawyer, newly married, let's say. And about 1984, it was the scene of the largest bioterrorism attack in the United States. And I just don't have any recollection of it. But there was a commune in the Dalles, religious commune, and they wanted to take over the politics of the county. So they decided they would put salmonella in numerous restaurants, and they poisoned upwards of 800 people in an effort to stop them from voting. But the rest of the story is I don't think they won the vote. Okay, let's go to the next picture. This is just a picture from our hotel patio looking out at the river. Next one, please. That's our boat, the one that looks newer than the paddle wheel. I think the paddle wheel belonged to a different company. There's probably 2 or 3 companies that cruise. I saw the Viking, which is my understanding cruises mostly in Europe. They just started a lower Mississippi cruise. So hopefully with some competition, the price will go down. Let's go to the next one. That's our jet boat. The jet boat has an 18-inch draft, which basically means that it will sink down about 18 inches in the water. And that's because when you go on the Snake River, there are rapids, but they were small rapids. I've been on some big rapids in the raft in my college days. And so this boat was fully enclosed with plastic like you have on golf carts. And you didn't get wet. And it was a thrilling ride with probably about 20 passengers and 2 crew members. The trip took about 6 hours, 3 hours up and 3 hours back, and halfway there, we stopped. But this is what you're cruising between. On the right is probably Washington, and on the left is either Idaho or Oregon. I have a picture you'll see where you can see 3 states from where I'm standing. I mean, the scenery is just breathtaking. And what the benefit of taking a theme cruise, they have like I'm going on the Civil War theme. Next week in the lower Mississippi, they have food cruises, they have music cruises, Civil War theme, holiday cruises. And in this particular cruise, we had a historian. It's a husband and wife thing. The husband played the piano. That's why there's no Vegas show. The husband played the piano. The wife sang, but the piano player was a very good historian, and he knew a lot about the geology that they would tell you about. He would tell you about as you travel through there. And he told us about the Cascades, which I read about are just below Vancouver, British Columbia, down at the Northern California, and the water-laden clouds that come off the Pacific will hit the Cascades and dump most of their water. And so as you see these pictures, as we go east to west towards the Pacific, you'll see how it gets a lot greener. But it was not a whole lot of growth here. There's another one. And just beautiful scenery. This is all the Snake River. And then there are houses along here, and the guy told us that they're either brought in pieces by jet boat or brought in by helicopter, because this area of the country is essentially inaccessible by vehicle. I read where there are no bridges across the Snake River between Idaho and Oregon and Washington. There's a little greenery there. We saw a ranch. There was a ranch there that had some cows, and where we stopped for lunch, it was a ranch, and they had some cows there too. Those are mountain goats, doing what they do. Again, very just breathtaking scenery. That's probably my favorite picture right there. Okay. You can see a little bit of the rapids over here to the left. And there's more rapids. And what's interesting is one of the people on the jet boat asked the guy that was driving it, and all he had was this big stick in front of him. He just cruising down that river like that. And he asked about how do you know where to go so you don't hit rocks. He says, I just watched other people do it and learn. And you're going at pretty good speed, so GPS won't do you any good, because by the time you see it on the boat's GPS, you're already hitting that rock. Now, there's our jet boat parked. And this ranch was operated by the cruise line. There was a husband and wife there, and it was a beautiful day, even though it was, we went October 9th. And so it wasn't summertime, but it was just beautiful days we had, most of them. And I took this picture from this little ranch, but they had a whole barbecue set up for us for lunch. And it's probably the best barbecue I've ever had. We have mobility issues. There are some places where you can go. The cruise line has lots of wheelchairs. And they'll help you get on it, and they'll help you get off. But by and large, if you're in a wheelchair, when you take the bus to where you're going, it's a cruise line bus. And when you get to where you're going, you better have a friend to help you with your wheelchair. Or you could just stay in the bus. Some of these bus rides were 2 hours long, and so you see a lot of the country. Let's go back one. In the upper side there, you can see a white sign. Now you can see less of it. On the other side of the river, you see a little white sign. Well, I'm standing, taking this picture from the ranch where we eat lunch. I'm standing in Idaho. To the right of the white sign is the state of Washington, and to the left of that white sign is Oregon.
Wow.
Okay. Again, those are probably the biggest rapids you're going to see. I wouldn't worry about rapids if you think about taking this trip. Now, let me explain this. This is as close as we could get, and I've got a picture of a picture to show you what you're looking at. This is a pictograph, I'm told, and I read about it, and pictographs are paintings on rocks as opposed to hieroglyphics, which are more like carvings. And this was painted by, was all Indian country many years ago. And so this was painted many years ago by an Indian. And I'm sure each figure meant something to that Indian and to the other Indians that saw it. And as I was preparing for this, I thought, you know what? These are the first emojis. You think about it, you know, we text, we email, thumbs up, thumbs down, smiley face. So these are the first emoji. Okay. We're still on our Snake River cruise here. And now we're getting ready the next day to board. This is just by coincidence. This is a couple that we ate with that are from Chicago. And there's one dining room, and there's only one seating. And usually breakfast is like 7 to 9, lunch is maybe 11 to 1, and then free beer and wine at lunch and dinner. But before dinner, there's about a 2-hour happy hour that's free. I think on ocean cruises, you have to pay for your drinks. Not here. The booze, later. So you have about a 2-hour cocktail hour before dinner, and that's when the historian may give his presentation. And then after dinner, take an hour break, freshen up, and go back to where we're going to sing and dance, and more cocktails flowing. So we sat generally at the same table. The tables usually sat 6 people. And when we first sat down, we happened to sit with this couple from Chicago. We sat with, I say an older gentleman because he talked about when he graduated high school in 1947. So he was probably in his early 90s, and he had his, I don't mean to suspect, he had a new girlfriend. She had hunted him down after her spouse died. And his spouse died. He was a stockbroker in New York, and I don't know what she did, but I think she's in Tennessee. So they got together again and went on this cruise. And usually we would sit with them. Occasionally, if we were late, somebody else would take our seats, and we'd go with some other people. And we tended to have the same waitress each time. The whole crew was American. It doesn't bother me, but they tout the fact that the crew is entirely American. Everybody is vaccinated, and there's no tipping required. We did put some money in an envelope. We, the people at the table, put some probably, I'm saying a total of $120 in an envelope on the last morning of the cruise at breakfast, and we gave that to our waitress. She was a student at Clemson. I guess maybe because of COVID, she wasn't at school in October. But that's our boat. Okay. There are about 8 locks and dams on the way to the ocean. When Lewis and Clark and other explorers did it, they would either ride the rapids, or they would, I think it's called, they would portage, which is where you pick up your canoe and you walk around. Well, now there are 8 locks and dams. You see that lighter colored line at the top of this lock? That's where the water started when we got into the lock. And of course, going from the Columbia to the Pacific, you're going down. And so they would drop the water down and open up. I call this a clamshell. Let's look at the next one. There's at the bottom is the bow of the boat. And here's where you can see now how far the water's going down. And this is where, let's go to the next one. And then the next one. And then out you go. And what's interesting is I went outside when we were going through one of these, and they have these little, I don't know what they, I was in the Navy, you think I knew what they're called. They have these little wings that go out on the side of the ship, so the crew can stand out on this wing and look all the way back to the ship. And I looked down, and here's this crew member. It was an officer, and he had what looked like a PlayStation thing in his hand. And he's going like this, and all I can think of is I think there are thrusters on the sides of the boat, and he's moving the boat sideways so it won't hit the rocks. Okay, let's go. This is the other style. This one goes up. Let's go to the next one. Now you can see where it's going up. There's 2 huge towers. There's part of them that pull this huge thing up like that. In the distance is Mount Hood. And you'll see dramatic pictures of Mount St Helens, and then there also is Mount Rainier, that I think those 3 are probably the most familiar to us. There's a better picture of Mount Hood. This is the back of one of the blocks. There's another one. You still see there's no greenery yet. This is from our balcony. Every cabin had a balcony. And when we originally booked this cruise, we booked cheapest one. A lot of them are the same. They're just a couple hundred feet bigger as you pay more money. But there are suites. There was a suite for 24,000. And when you get online, they'll tell you it's sold out. One available, sold. This is again another picture. Now, what's interesting to me, I hope there's no geologists in here to say I'm wrong, but I went to school in West Virginia, and we had mountains there. They're really just big hills. If you've ever been to the Rockies, they're the mountains. But in West Virginia, you look out and all the mountains are the same height. My geology professor said it's not that the mountains are high, it's that the valleys are deep, meaning that at one time, eons ago, the land was all up there. Over many thousands of years, the rivers have cut down. And I think that's probably part of what happened here, is these mountains didn't rise up. They were cut down. There's a house there. Believe it or not, somebody lives there. Let me just mention that we had television, never a problem with reception. Internet was very spotty. I'm a news junkie, and at the end of the day, I wanted to get on my iPad and look at the news. I think it was one day that I actually had some internet reception, and I don't know why, because you're only a few hundred yards from the shore on either side. Washington on one side, Oregon on the other. And when you get toward, there's another house up there. There's another one. Yeah, you go back, if you want to go back to that, there's our renewable energy up there, windmills. Okay, let's go. More. Now, we were cruising past these things, and I asked the historian, I said, what are those? I think I have pictures of 3 of these. Again, there's another one more. I said, what are these things? He says, these are fishing docks that the Indians stand on and cast their nets to catch salmon. And by a very old treaty between this particular tribe and the United States government, only the Indians are allowed to use nets to fish for salmon on this river, and that's where they do it from. I wouldn't want to go there. Okay, again, now you can see it's getting greener. This happened to be one of our more cloudy days. These boats don't go very fast. I mean, they're, I don't know, 20 miles an hour or less maybe. So you have plenty of time to relax and watch the scenery. And some people never leave the boat. I mean, I went to the back of the boat and there were these puzzles all over. And there were some older women, older than me, doing puzzles. And so I assume they take these trips to look at the scenery. And that's what they do, is they just relax and do puzzles. Now we're getting into some more vegetation, as you can see. Okay. It's a beautiful home there. I don't know what all that smoke was, but I took it anyway, took the picture. Okay. This boat, you can get on the back, go around the sides, and in this particular case, the front of the boat opened up, and that's how we got in and out. And I swear, there were some times when we had 7 ports of call, but we didn't have a dock. And the captain just went into the shore and kept his engines going to hold us into the shore. And I think one time I got up and that ship was just grinding. And I looked down and I think we just having trouble backing off this shore. Okay. This is Multnomah Falls. It's a 2-stage fall. Unfortunately, somehow I got rid of the picture that has the 2nd stage, but this is billed as the 2nd tallest continuously flowing falls in the U.S. So I get on Wikipedia and go, I wonder what the first one is. If this is the 2nd tallest, what's the first tallest? I couldn't find it. But I did read that there is a dispute as to whether or not this is the 2nd tallest. You would think that today with lasers and that kind of thing that we could figure out what's the 2nd tallest. But the article is kind of funny. It says, don't tell an Oregonian that this is not the 2nd tallest. Okay? Now this particular picture was taken from the cruise boat. One of the excursions we took was to actually walk. We took, of course, a bus ride, and down below these people here from this observation point is the lower falls. And there was, I think it was 2 weeks or last week when we got home, I saw this headline. I said, look at this. There was a mother, a young mother, and her child fell. The way I read the story, they fell from just getting onto this bridge and down into the lower pool. And they were saved by people who jumped in. Next, please. That's me and my wife. Please note that we have our Hilton Head sweatshirts on. This cruise line, by the way, has one of its cruises stops in Beaufort, and then they stop in Hilton Head. This is another one where we didn't have a dock. And you can see to the right is an American Cruise Line bus. There were 3 of them. And each bus holds about 50. So there was about 150 people, I think, on this cruise. It probably holds more. I think they probably held back some of the cabins because of COVID. And let me just address that real quick. I have no idea what the protocol is now. To take this cruise, you have to prove that you've been vaccinated by sending it in before your cruise, emailing it. And then the morning of the cruise, you had to show it. And 3 days before you travel, you had to get the PCR test, which has to go to the lab. So the wife and I appointed at CVS Pharmacy. We drove up, got our nose swab. That was like 3 o'clock on a Sunday. By 2 o'clock on Monday, they say it's a 3-day term. By 2 o'clock Monday, we had our test in our email. And we had to email that to the cruise. And then the morning of the cruise, they do a rapid test. And the nurse says, if you don't hear from us, go back to your hotel room. If you don't hear from us in 15 minutes, you're allowed to get on the boat. What do you do if you down spend $2,000 flying out there and they say, oh, you're not getting on the boat? Okay. I went up on the deck. And you'll see nobody, I have several pictures of the top of the boat. And there's nobody up there. And I think that's because this was early October. And it was just not the time of year where you go out and sun yourself. Even though it's beautiful weather. There's more of the deck. This again is just another picture from my balcony. This is from the stern of the boat. And here's I was going to say on the right there, up there, you can see some kind of tanker, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. Let's go to the next picture. Again, plenty of places to sit if the weather was nice enough. And when we booked this several months in advance, they were all taken up. I mean, this is like the only option we have left, despite the cost. This is all that was left. Next. Good. I think this picture is out of place because it's not very green. I can assure you that is a sunset. But I did not get up to take pictures of the sunrise. Yeah, I think this picture maybe is out of place. When we transferred it from my computer to the PowerPoint, just put a few of them out of order. That's a huge rock in the middle of the Columbia River. Now I think this is where we're getting ready to go to Mount St. Helens. You can see how they have a carpet laid out. The guy on the far left, I don't know if, I know all the cruise members wear these red shirts and they'll push you up there to get you to your bus. And they'll get you down when you're done with the bus. And again, you really need some help if you're in a wheelchair. Okay. You can see all these ships, tankers. They aren't container ships, but you'll see later that this is a working river. There are these big ships coming and going. And our bus driver taking us to one of the excursions, he's in his 30s. He said, I've lived here all my life, I've never lived anywhere else. And he said, these trains are going up and down both sides of the river. He said, over 100 a day. Every time you look out, there's another train going up and down these rivers on both sides. Again, that's a sunset. Okay. I think this is where we're pulling in, and I say I think, it's because I know some of these pictures have GPS locators when you take the picture, but not all of them do. Because I wanted to find out where I took this, and some of these I could not tell, but I think this is probably near Astoria, Oregon. Next. This is Mount St. Helens from a distance. Let me tell you, I remember I was newly married. This was May when this eruption occurred, May of 1980. I got married in March of 1980. I remember you come home for a month and every night on the news, there was another story about how this bulge on the side of the mountain is getting bigger. And of course, most volcanoes blow up. This one blew sideways. This is taken from the bus. That's why I say, even if you have mobility issues, you still can ride the bus and get some pretty good views. Next. This is from the turnaround where the bus stopped. In this particular case, the bus is probably 200 or 300 yards downhill from the lookout. So again, we had one guy on the bus that had a wheelchair. He just stayed on the bus. Extremely windy. Next. This is the lookout. My grandkids this morning, I showed them a book I made of this. And they asked how far away it is. And the answer is, I don't know, but I think it's probably several miles. This is a really dramatic picture. I mean, you can see the trees down there. There are still hikers and climbers. And I looked up some statistics. There were 57 people that were killed, 200 homes were destroyed, 47 bridges were destroyed, 50 miles of railroad, 185 roads, 7,000 deer, elk, and bear. And what's interesting, this occurred about 8:30 on a Sunday morning. And I don't know why they were working, but there was a logging crew of 4 men who were working on Sunday morning, and 3 of them were killed by the hot ash. And the 4th survived. And I read where the ash came out at 400 miles an hour when it blew out the side of the mountain. One of those people killed was David Johnson, a 31-year-old volcanologist who was a federal employee, worked for the United States Geological Service, and he was 6 miles from the eruption. And his job was to monitor this bulge. And his last words ever were, Vancouver, Vancouver, this is it. And his body's never been back. That's, I guess I used a Zoom on my phone to do that. Okay, next. This probably was the highlight of my trip up in the jet boat, seeing this, because I lived through it. That in the distance is Mount Rainier, taken from the lookout. Over here on the left, you can see these trees that are still there from 42 years ago, knocked over and burned. I tried, in the distance, you can see some trees burned up there. I just tried to do that. And some of these trees, there's I call a logging company, Weyerhaeuser, W-E-Y.
Weyerhaeuser.
And they do everything. But one thing they do is they planted thousands of trees in this area. There's some more trees that have been knocked down. Okay. We were docked at Astoria, and then we went across the Columbia River. This was a pretty good bus ride, but again, you're seeing things you've never seen before. If you look at the point where the Columbia River meets the Pacific Ocean, I don't know if you can read it here, but it says it's named Cape Disappointment. And what's interesting is I went and read about this, and this was discovered by an explorer a few years before Lewis and Clark. Lewis and Clark made this expedition around 1803 or 4, but this explorer preceded them, and he was looking for the Pacific Ocean. When he got to what he later called Cape Disappointment, he looks out, this vast thing of water, and he thinks he's looking at the bed of the Columbia River. And so because he didn't find the Pacific Ocean, he called it Cape Disappointment. Now, where the Columbia River, let's go to the next one. Let me tell you about Astoria. Make some notes. Astoria is named after John Jacob Astor, who was a German immigrant who first made his money in real estate in New York, then got into fur trading, and in this particular area of the country, fur trading was always pretty big, not now, but today, it was always big. And you had the British were there, Canadians were there, the Indians were there, and John Jacob Astor was there. And his plan to make more money through the fur trade fell apart in 1812 or 13, when the War of 1812 started between the British and the English. And so he sold his fur trade to the Canadians. And this was a tower that was dedicated to him by his grandson. The next picture is from the lookout, not on the tower, but near the tower. Just a beautiful country. This is us making our way to the Pacific. That's the bridge we went across to get to Mount St Helens and Cape Disappointment. Just to the upper left is the Pacific Ocean coming into view. I took this picture in a museum. I'm not a museum person, but we went to several museums, and they were really good. We went to a museum early on an Indian reservation, and then we went to several maritime reservations. In this particular display, you could push one of these buttons down here, and a boat would light up, and they would tell you the history of it. There are documented 2,000 shipwrecks in this area, and that's because of what they call the bar, which is where the Columbia meets the Pacific. And I didn't know this till this trip, but there are what they call bar masters. And a bar master's sole job is to get on the boat and either get it into the ocean or back into the Columbia River. They used to pull up next to the boat and climb up a rope. Now the helicopters drop them onto the boat, and they take over for the captain so they can get across the bar. This is a U.S. Coast Guard has a fairly significant training facility here, and that's because they do, I may have this wrong, I thought the guy said about 300 rescues a year. That's like one almost every other day. And that's where they train, because that's what they have to do, is learn to rescue these people coming in and out of the bar. That's a jetty that's man-made. This would be on the northern side. Of course, the Pacific is at the top, and down below, you see where you have these real churning water where the Pacific and the Columbia meet. There's another shot of it. I didn't get the whole White House, but there's a museum here. This is Cape Disappointment, and there's a federal, what do you call them? People at the forest. Show you the guides. Forest ranger. He's been here 20 years. I guess he loves it. This is right below that White House, and again, over the jetty to the south is the Pacific, and here's where the Columbia is meeting the Pacific Ocean. Now we're on our way back. We went back to Portland, which was our last port of call, and that's where we would fly out of the next morning. And I'm sure in the summertime, this is probably loaded with people enjoying. There's a fisherman there. There's a few people there. Because of the time of the year, not a lot. Again, another example of how this is a working river. You'll see some more. You'll see there's thousands of logs going across the middle of this picture. Thousands of unfinished logs. There's now, there you can see them closer there. Still the next. I think that's probably plywood. This is the same facility. So you go from logs to plywood to finished lumber. And that is a picture out my airplane window, which means I'm on my way home, and the presentation is over. Thank you very much. It's a perfect time. Are there any questions? Okay. They have, the question is, do they have room for singles? There's probably 6 cabins that are singles. And I only say that because if you get on the website, every ship they have, every boat they have, they have 4 planes. Yes?
You mentioned the cost, that's the first.
No, that was per cabin. And again, we saw some ours just looked like a typical motel room. The doors sometimes are propped open, people put their luggage in, peek in, and question is how many days they say it. Each day, you have to be off the boat, right? Morning and have to cross the line. That 10,000 is all about. Another slide. Was helpful in things. I think it was probably 2 or 3 months. And question is different question. Also, why did you start? Build another. What is it?
Just a minute, folks. We'll get you back connected.
Hey, no. Maybe a little more difficult for me next time. Okay, prizes. People that